It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. If you just contact me through my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Also, too, if you like the show, be sure and check out our Patreon. I've been putting a lot of exclusive content up on the Patreon. Of course, everything you hear Monday to Friday on AM/FM radio, you could find the Patreon with all the commercials cut out. But there's a lot of exclusive content there. An interview I did with Mae Pang, John Lennon's ex-girlfriend. A report I did about this prison break back in Las Vegas, Nevada. Just the official story is just so bizarre and so ridiculous. I had to put it up there. But when I read it, I just couldn't believe what I was reading. And then I did a show about Art Bell and Melrose Hole, and how I knew the guy who wrote Melrose Hole and that character there. So all kind of great content. I just did an interview with Chuck Ocelli. He interviewed me, as a matter of fact, and we put that up there at Patreon, too, as well, the Opperman Report Patreon. Check out my TikTok, Ed Opperman at TikTok. I'm really trying to build up the TikTok. I'm getting all these messages from people on TikTok telling me how much they enjoy it, and, hey, how can I find the show from the TikTok? So I'm telling them the show first. Hey, find the TikTok. And then in the notes, you can tell people, in the comments, you can tell them how to find the show. Our archives are free at Spreaker.com. Go to Spreaker.com and do a live show there Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when we put up new content. I'm doing a follow-up show on that train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, because you're going to be shocked when you hear what I'm hearing here. I'm talking to Jamie Wallace. She lives down there, and she's part of this group here, Unity Council for the East Palestine Train Derailment. You can find them on Facebook at Unity Council for the East Palestine Train Derailment. They're on YouTube at EP Unity Council, and on all social media, if you look for the hashtag EP Unity Council, you can find all their content they're putting up on Twitter and Instagram, on TikTok, trying to draw attention to the situation down there because they're not getting any help. They're not getting any attention from the federal government. We were just talking off there about how Biden's over there visiting Israel and Ukraine, but he hasn't stepped foot in East Palestine to speak to his own citizens there, many of whom probably voted for him. Jamie Wallace, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you for having me today.
No, thank you so much. Before we get into this whole story about East Palestine, tell us about yourself. Who is Jamie Wallace?
Jamie Wallace is just your everyday house mother. I was working a full-time job. Actually, my husband was a stay-at-home dad. We have a 4-year-old, go to work, make dinner, enjoyed outdoor activities with our daughter, going for hikes. We like fishing. Just your everyday person living my quiet little life in my little country hometown and raising my daughter. That was my plans for the rest of my life, is to finish working, retire, and grow there in my hometown with my daughter.
Well, let me ask, because we were talking off the air a bit. Now, after this disaster, can you go fishing? Can you go hiking? Or are you afraid to be out in the elements out there, exposed to these chemicals?
Yeah, you definitely can't enjoy nature anymore. We still have highly contaminated streams. I know the EPA recently put out a report and said that it was okay to eat the wildlife, but yet a friend of mine was in the creeks and found a dead frog and poked it with a shovel, and chemicals started pouring out of the frog. They've not tested the wildlife, so when they say there's no reason to believe that they're chemically contaminated, that's because they haven't tested them yet.
Okay, let's back up and get back to the beginning. Tell me of the day, how Jamie Wallace experienced the day of the derailment. Did you hear sirens go off? How'd you hear about this? How'd you know about it?
Well, it was a Friday night. It was later in the evening. It was kind of not a typical Friday night for us. My husband's best friend came down from Cleveland. They hadn't seen each other in like a year. So I was watching his son and my daughter, and they went out to have drinks at our local tavern. As we were sitting there, I started to hear some sirens. We're very much, a small community. You hear an ambulance or fire truck, and you jump out and look out the window because you probably know where it's going. So it kind of caught my attention, and then my mom called. And my mom said a train just derailed down by Leaks gas station. The bar that my husband and his friend were at is called State Line Tavern because it sits right on the state line. And that's where the train had derailed, right behind there. So I immediately called my husband, and he's like, oh, it's a little fire, you know, typical husband. You just don't want me out having drinks with my buddy. And I'm like, no, this is, my mom called me a train derailed. About 5 minutes later, he called me back, and he's like, I'm on my way home. He's like, Leaks gas station's going to blow.
Wow.
So he came home, and he wasn't home maybe 15, 20 minutes, and my mom called back, and she said they are evacuating everyone within a 1 mile radius of the James Street crossing. So my husband's friend and his son get in their car and leave, and, we literally grabbed my daughter, a change of clothes for her, jumped in our car. It's the middle of winter. It's cold out. The heater in my car had broke earlier that week, and I was riding to work all week with a friend of mine, bundled the baby up, no heater, had no clue where we were going, and we just headed out of town.
What a nightmare. Now, you were telling me your daughter's 4 now. I guess she was under 4 then, right?
She was 3.
Oh, my God.
She was, she was confused. She didn't know what was going on, and
Sure.
I think she felt that tension and that sense of urgency. One of the issues that we ran into is we are a little small country town. We have one hotel that's about 15, 20 minutes away, and the rest of them you have to travel 30, 40 minutes to get to. So we couldn't even find a hotel in the area. They were all filling up. I ended up calling my brother, and they were able to get a couple of hotel rooms. And he said, just come spend the night with us. Kids can sleep on the floor or whatever. So that's what we did that night because I guess I just thought we were going back in the morning.
Right.
We didn't know at that point what the extent of it was. So never been evacuated from my home. Didn't know what was going on. So we were like, yeah, we'll just crash there for the night.
Now, what about, was there traffic? Could you see smoke? What was going on?
You could see the smoke.
Could you smell it? Could you smell it when you were driving?
Oh, most definitely.
Oh, my God.
As soon as I walked out my front door, you could smell the chemicals. We were going in the opposite direction of where the derailment was, and you could see all the smoke. You could smell it in the air. But, again, you still just weren't quite sure. When you live in a community that a train runs through it, I've thought of all different scenarios. What if you're walking across the railroad tracks and your foot gets stuck, or your car stalls in the middle of the tracks? But I never once thought, what if a tanker full of chemicals derailed in my community, let alone 20 cars of highly carcinogenic chemicals?
Now, what about the initial response of the local first responders, they call them now? Were you getting updated, notified on the radio, or how were you being notified on what to do and where to go?
No, we had police officers that were going door to door.
Wow.
Telling people that they needed to evacuate. We found out since then that our firefighters were being told there was malt liquor on the train and to treat it like a fire, like a house fire.
Yeah.
There were 68 different fire departments that responded, and at no fault of their own. They sprayed hundreds of thousands of gallons of water onto those chemicals right next to our creek.
Right. So that would make it wash into the creek, made it worse, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't even know what they were dealing with. So, like I said, at no fault of their own, there just was not a whole lot of communication from anyone. As far as our city government, they posted something on Facebook.
Wow.
Evacuating, but a lot of the residents didn't even know that they needed to evacuate, didn't know that the derailment had happened, in particular in PA. PA is often forgotten about. This literally happened, like I said. The bar my husband was at is called State Line Tavern because it sits on the state line. You could literally throw a rock into PA. So PA residents were really left in the dark.
What is PA? I've never heard that before.
Pennsylvania.
Oh, Pennsylvania. Is that close to Ohio? I had no idea. No way. Is it?
Yeah, we're right on the, actually where we live, it's in the tri-state area. So we, like I said, literally East Palestine borders Pennsylvania.
Huh.
And then also about 10, 15 minutes south of East Palestine is the panhandle to West Virginia.
Okay.
So we have West Virginia, Ohio, and PA right there all together.
I don't know my geography, I'll tell you that. Okay, so now you stay at your brother's house at night. Are you able to ever go back home?
Well, the next morning, my husband and I, we were hearing that they were closing off all the traffic to town. And again, it was just very much like by word of mouth, not really nothing on the television, didn't know what was going on. So we left my daughter with my brother at the hotel, and my husband and I decide that we're going to drive back to town. What we saw when we got back to town, the first thing before we saw anything was the smell. I cannot describe it. It's something you've never smelt before. The only way to describe it is almost like a sweet bleach smell.
Right.
But just knew it wasn't good. You could see the smoke coming off of the train because it was still on fire, but it was the strangest smoke I've ever seen. It wasn't like, smoke blows up and it kind of blows away and kind of billows. It was just like hovering over the community, and it was like this greenish-colored smoke. It was almost like fog, and you just knew it didn't look right. There was something wrong. You just felt that in your gut. So we went back to my brother's hotel room. We ended up booking a hotel that we found in West Virginia. It was only about 20 minutes away from East Palestine. And
Jamie, you broke up. Can you hear me? Jamie? Yeah, we're having some problems with the audio. Jamie, are you there? Let me see if I can. Maybe the phone got disconnected. Oh, you're there now. Yeah, you're back. Yeah, we lost you. The last thing you said was you went 20 minutes away to West Virginia.
Yeah, we went
but a quick question before you start again. Now, is 20 minutes far enough away to be away from this smoke and this gas and stuff?
We didn't know at the time.
But you kind of thought it was?
Yeah, we still don't know, what the extent of the contamination is.
Right.
And even then, at that point, we still didn't know what was on the train.
Gotcha.
Our firefighters knew that night that it was vinyl chloride, was the chemical of biggest concern. But we didn't know that. They didn't tell us what it was. We found out since then that our firefighters didn't have that manifest for hours
right
after but the cleanup crew for Norfolk Southern had it within 14 minutes.
Okay, so you were telling me you got the room 20 minutes away, and what happens next?
So we go down to West Virginia, and we're staying in the hotel down there, and we found out that, we were going to be out of town a little longer, so we didn't have a lot of money. Norfolk Southern had set up an assistance center in East Palestine where you could go and get reimbursed for your hotels.
Right.
So I was going to run back into town with my niece to go to the assistance center and get the reimbursement so that we had enough money to continue to stay in the hotel. And we were going to run back to the house and grab prescriptions and clothes. We didn't think about grabbing our prescriptions when we were running out of the house, right, kind of in a panic. So when I pulled in my driveway, back up just a second, before I left, my husband and I were kind of arguing. He's like, well, when they lift that evacuation, we're not going back home. And I said, well, where are we going to go? He said, I don't care if we have to live on the riverbank. I'm not taking our daughter back in there. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, if the EPA says it's fine, it's fine. It's the EPA. As soon as I pulled in my driveway that creek ran right along my driveway, Sulphur Run, I was just overtaken by this chemical smell. I started coughing, lungs were burning, lips were on fire, eyes were burning. My niece is doing the same thing. I look over at the creek, and there's chemicals free-flowing down the creek. And that's when I knew right then I didn't have to be a scientist. I didn't need to listen to the EPA. I knew right then and there that it was not safe to be there.
What about what happens next?
So after that, they do the controlled burn. The EPA lifts the evacuation on our community. They cannot run a train through an evacuated town. So I feel like that's why this was such a rush to get us back into town.
Right.
The one that they were offering us was indoor air monitoring. They wanted to come in and they would test your air in your home. And that was supposed to show you that it was safe to come home. So we signed up to have this air testing done. We went there the day of the air testing, literally 2 minutes through my house. I asked, what all chemicals are in the creek? We still have not seen a manifest, and they've lifted the evacuation. We've heard rumors about what were in those tankers, but we didn't know. Well, the manifest will be coming out. I said, has there been soil sampling done? EPA doesn't feel like we need to test the soil. Well, what about the creek water? Has it been tested? Well, yeah, results will come out later. What we found out after that was that the air testing that they were doing in our home, the EPA admitted it was insufficient. Their machines could only pick up emergency levels, not unsafe levels. So basically, you weren't going to drop over dead when you walked back in your house. Wow. So virtually no testing had been done, and they lifted that evacuation. Well, me being the loudmouth, redheaded Italian that I am, I kind of threw a fit, and I said, I want the railroad to come down and look at my house. My house is 5 steps to the embankment of Sulphur Run from my front door. My basement is 5 steps to the embankment, to the Sulphur Run Creek, which was the most highly contaminated creek. I'm not a scientist, but I know that creek water goes from 4 inches to 4 feet in a good rain, and with all those chemicals in it, that was going to leach right into the soil and into my basement. So the railroad agreed to have someone from CTEH, which is the company that was hired by Norfolk Southern, come down and look at my house. When he came down, he saw just some moisture, probably less than 12 inches wide, coming down my basement wall that faced that embankment. And he said that if that contaminated water puddled, it would off-gas, and it would create, health issues. It could be harmful to our health. It could even be fatal if it built up enough. So the day after that, which was February 15th, my birthday, the railroad called that morning, and they said, hey, let's get you out of there. Do you guys rent? Do you own? I said, we just rent. Okay, well, we'll get you another place and replace whatever you need replaced, and how much money do you want? And I said, well, let me think about this. I don't even know, what I need to replace. I don't know anything yet. So we could have taken that money and took off, but that's not the people my husband and I are. I had 47 immediate family members that live in that 1 mile zone. Everybody's kids that have called me Aunt Red their whole life, all my friends. And I knew they weren't just wrong about our house. It didn't just happen that they were wrong about one house, and I happened to be the person that threw a fit. So that night was our first town hall meeting. Norfolk Southern pulled out of it. They said that they feared for their safety, but the EPA was there, first responders were there, politicians, local politicians, federal politicians, they were all there. Everyone's saying that no houses are found to be contaminated, everything's fine. And I take the microphone and I tell them my story. I was kind of rushed off of the microphone by our federal representative. He said, put your name and number on this privacy form and I'll get back to you. I even told him I had a video. Not one single person in that room ever called me back.
Now, you would think that there would be a rush of attorneys rushing into town to sign up every citizen in that town for lawsuits against everybody. The railroad, the chemical manufacturers, the city, the state, everybody, right? Is that going on?
There were a lot of attorneys that came in. They had, these informational sessions. But I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't go to those. I've still not signed with an attorney. I do have my Juris Doctor degree, so I know that we have 2 years to sign up for the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And immediate health concerns, I've not really thought about the money. I think eventually they need to pay for what they've done financially, but right now we're still actively being exposed to chemicals. So my focus has been on that human health aspect and getting the testing done that needs to be done.
Right. I was going to ask you that next. Now, what about you and your family? Have you been to the doctor to see? I know you told me you went to the doctor the other night about another matter, but have you been to a doctor for tests about this? An independent doctor far away from this town that's not going to be bought off or cahoots, Have you been to a doctor?
Well, here's some of the issues with the doctors in the area.
Yeah.
The first issue is right after the initial derailment, there was a memo that came down from the CDC that told our doctors not to give chemical diagnoses. There had already been people that were diagnosed with chemical bronchitis. My twin nieces that are 13 had chemical bronchitis. My daughter and I both had breathing issues. I went to the emergency room and they said we had upper respiratory infection. Mm-hmm. I had an upper respiratory infection for 4 months. I'm 46 years old. I went through 3 rounds of antibiotics, 3 rounds of steroids, and it lasted for 4 months. I have never in my life had an upper respiratory infection that lasted that long. I know what an upper respiratory infection was, and this was something a lot more than that. So...
Yeah, clearly that's ridiculous. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's ridiculous. There's no way to coincidentally got some infection, at the same time that they're pouring chemicals down your lungs there, and smoke and all kinds of stuff, and exposing your creek, like you said. But, okay, so if the local doctors, though, are in the bag, can't you bring in outside doctors or go to another city or something like that and just, don't tell them what's going on, just get an examination? How would insurance cover that? Probably not, right? You'd have to do it within the state, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I know, when people started testing positive for vinyl chloride, we film everything now. We have it on tape where the CDC sent down another memorandum to the biggest, health companies around here and told them not to write prescriptions for vinyl chloride anymore. It's only in your system for 48 hours. And it couldn't possibly still be in our systems. Now, how does the CDC say not to write a prescription? We were literally arguing with our doctors, and they're saying, no, you can't be tested.
And also, too, what would be the harm of taking the prescription? And clearly, if it's in the creek, okay, maybe the first day you were examined, you could be exposed to it a month later. You step into a puddle or something. Who the hell knows?
Right.
What would be the downside of taking the prescription?
You tell me.
Liability is the only downside. I'm no medical expert, but the only thing that says, well, we don't want to say that this is caused by the spill,
It's a urine test.
It's a urine test.
It's a urine test that was showing these metabolites for vinyl chloride. And what we're being told is, well, it's lifestyle, choices. If you smoke or if you drink or if you do this or that, and it's they always say what it could be, but they never mention it could be the 5 tankers of vinyl chloride that you blew up over our community. And when you talk to outside doctors, you'd have to smoke 20 packs of cigarettes a day to get the levels we were coming back at. We had kids, 12-year-olds testing positive. Pretty sure they're not smoking 20 packs of cigarettes and getting drunk all day. The same thing when we started asking about dioxin. Well, this is my favorite. Dioxins can come from a barbecue grill.
Yeah.
Okay. We saw the big barbecue grill over East Palestine. Yeah, they could come from that, but, quit telling us what it could be from and tell us what it is from. Quit sticking up for the railroad because that's the perception when you say it can come from this, this, and this, but you never mention it could come from that, the explosion of those chemicals over our community.
Now,
so we were
okay.
refused testing, and also the insurance wouldn't cover the testing. So as far as, going to a doctor somewhere else, not even sure where we would go. And also financially, we're a very poor community. Yeah. We're actually considered part of Appalachia.
Yeah. So,
I think the median income down here is less than $40,000. So to even be able to travel to go to another doctor, to know where to find a doctor, we do have doctors coming into our community now to do independent health studies through different universities. But again, this is 9 months later almost, and they're just now starting to do these health studies.
When we first got on the phone a couple of days ago, you were on the way back from the emergency room, right? Now,
right.
Then because your daughter, your little 4-year-old baby, had hives. Do you think it's possible those hives are related to all this stuff?
I honestly do not think it is, only because she has not been back to town since the night of the derailment.
Okay, all right, okay.
But
But she's been around. You guys have been back to town. You're wearing the same clothes. You come back, right? No?
I know, and that scares me. I do think she'd never taken over-the-counter medication before.
Okay.
She was a COVID baby, so she hasn't been sick. I don't think that's related, but, a very good friend of mine, fellow Unity Council member, she was saying her kids got very sick. She has 5 boys. They got very sick after the derailment, nosebleeds, skin rashes, couldn't breathe. She was told that I think like 3 of her kids, she was told have asthma now. They just came down with asthma. But the EPA can't find the pathway of exposure between the chemicals and the illness. You didn't just have 50 kids in your town come down with asthma or eczema. She was gone for 6 months. She came back to her home because Norfolk Southern's starting to cut people off if they come in and dry dust your house. Whole other story. She brought her boys back into town, and they are covered in rashes again. Can't breathe. But yet we can't get indoor home air testing.
Well, I guess we could look at this and say, well, it's incompetence, but has the federal government come in there and declared an emergency? Has the National Guard been there? Has FEMA been there? What is the response been to react to this disaster?
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but if you look at everything Biden puts out, he says that he ordered the CDC, EPA, and FEMA to go door to door.
Okay.
The CDC came in for 1 day and went door to door, and half of them got sick. They left and never came back until we demanded they come back. They came back. It's been a couple months ago now. And what the CDC stood up there and told us is, we know you've all been exposed to vinyl chloride. We don't know what to do about vinyl chloride in your body, but we can treat the cancers that it causes. That's what the CDC told us.
Did FEMA ever come?
I believe they may have been in town for a couple of days at some point.
Well, clearly they haven't made any effort. If you haven't noticed, if you don't see a big FEMA truck and a tent, clearly they've done nothing, okay? Even if they have been to town and stopped off at the strip club and kept moving. Now, what about people just passing through that town right now? If people pass through the town today, do they smell stuff? Do they say, "Oh, hey, what's going on?" I feel yicky,
It depends. What people don't realize about chemical exposure is there's a tolerance to it. So everyone has a different tolerance, and people can build up a tolerance. It's kind of like, the crazy cat lady doesn't know that she smells.
Right.
Because she smells it all the time. And it also depends on the day. Like we've noticed when there's moisture in the air, when it rains, it gets a lot worse. The smell does, the symptoms do. It's kind of like, I compare it to COVID. Some people are asymptomatic. They've never had one issue. Some people are deathly ill. Just like with COVID, one person could have no signs or symptoms and a person could die. And that's part of what's causing this big divide in our community is some people haven't been sick at all. They're saying it's mass psychosis. It's not mass psychosis when a 2-year-old's covered in a rash. They're not manifesting that in their mind. If anything, it's kind of the opposite because you try to justify it. Every time I go in town and I get congested and start coughing, I think, well, maybe I was just starting to get a cold. Maybe I was just...
Right.
And then you have tell yourself no. It doesn't just happen to be getting a cold every time you go into East Palestine. So it affects people in different ways. Some people have to be in town for a couple hours before they get sick. Some people, 5 minutes and they're sick. Some people don't get sick at all. So it just really, truly depends. But I think part of the problem of seeing what a disaster this is if you drive through East Palestine, it looks normal.
That's what I was saying. 'Cause I could have driven through there and not realized it, and I'm really sensitive to any kind of chemicals, any kind of stuff like that. I feel it right away. Pesticides, if I spray for bugs in my own house, I get sick.
Right.
I'm just wondering, people just drive through there and suspect, and then they get sick. But real quick, we're talking to Jamie Wallace. On Facebook, you can find this group, Unity Council for the East Palestine Train Derailment. That's on Facebook. There's a YouTube channel too as well. Then there's a hashtag that you can use on TikTok and Reels and Instagram, all that kind of stuff like that. It's EP Unity Council. Now, one of the things we're discussing here is that Biden, there's a deadline. We got 60 days as of today. Today is 4/21. Oh, yesterday was 4/20. I didn't even notice. No, 4/21 is the time. Today is 10/23. Sorry about it. Today's 10/23, and we've only got 60 days for Biden to declare. What's he going to declare? A national emergency for this? A disaster zone?
Well, it's actually Governor DeWine already put in the paperwork for the disaster declaration.
Okay.
But Biden has to sign off on it. All he has to do is wave that little pen, and we can get federal support. We keep being told there's an accountable party, and the taxpayer shouldn't have to pay for it. This accountable party is not taking care of us. We are U.S. citizens. We are here. We are sick. Our kids are still sick, and we're not being helped. As a taxpayer, I would much rather my taxpayer money go to a community that's suffering where children are sick than some of the places that our tax dollars go.
If they're saying there's an accountable party, which I would agree is the railroad and the chemical manufacturers and all this kind of stuff, but then who do you turn to hold them accountable? You turn to the EPA, who shows up for a day and leaves because they got sick. You turn to your federal government, who creates these laws and brings in FEMA to react to these kind of things. So yeah, there's an accountable party. Help hold them accountable,
Well, and I agree with that, but the burden should not be put on the citizens.
Oh, no, of course, yeah.
Don't have money. Why doesn't the federal government sue them?
Well, obviously, because they're in cahoots with this big rich company, clearly,
right.
And they're covering up for this big rich company.
Well, I tell myself all the time, I have to remind myself, if I would have talked to myself before this derailment, and I would have heard someone talking about EPA cover-up.
Yeah, right. People think it's crazy, yeah.
On by the railroad. You would think they were crazy conspiracy theorists,
right.
But this is the truth.
Right.
And I think what the American people don't realize is you just assume the government does what the government's supposed to do because you don't have to deal with them. And then when you start dealing with them, it's like, this can't possibly be reality. We can't be U.S. citizens that are sick. Our children are sick, and we're being completely ignored. We are human beings. It's not a red issue. It's not a blue issue. It's an issue of human life. This could be in any one of your backyards, and we always think it's not going to happen here or it can't happen here. It did happen here. Our kids are still sick, and we're being left here.
And another thing, too, is the reason the derailment happened is because of deregulation and all these loosening of...
Right.
Right. Because there's not just one or two derailments. These are things that are happening all over the freaking time. It's just very rare that all this kind of stuff spills, and then some wacky guy comes up with this plan to just burn it all up for people standing around. There's no accountability for that. Right? Is anybody, you think people would be arrested?
Well, and that's what I just said that too. They are starting to prosecute some of our residents and accusing them of fraud through this incident center. And I said, what are the charges against Norfolk Southern? The things that they have done to us, you literally your life is in the hands of this person working for Norfolk Southern. No training. There's no scientific data. We could be neighbors, and they could say, okay, yeah, I'll relocate you. I'm not relocating you. We'll get you lodging, food, and clothes. Yeah, we're just going to give you lodging based on absolutely nothing.
And who's making that decision? The company, the train company?
Yeah, Norfolk Southern. They have an assistance center. You have to go in there and beg. Do you know how degrading it is? I worked full-time at Cleveland State University from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, and I put myself through law school and my master's program from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. I have never had to ask anybody for anything, to go in there and have them highlighting receipts and to ask me why I bought shampoo twice in 1 week.
Wow.
I have a 4-year-old that dumped it out. It's absolutely humiliating to have to go in there and beg, and it's kind of like you getting raped and me saying, okay, go to your rapist, they'll make it right. There's no oversight of that assistance center. They have our local police officers moonlighting, and they work at the assistance center to provide security. They're in there telling Norfolk Southern who's who in our community. The things that are going on in this town are absolutely corrupt, and they're doing it right out in the open, and nobody cares.
Oh, no, yeah, this has every sign of corruption. That the company came in, they paid off all the politicians. They, like you said, they hired all the cops. I'm sure the fire department, too. They hired everybody part-time on the side. Spreading all the money out with the lawmakers and the rule makers to be like almost like a prison, occupying force over this town. Sorry?
Let's not forget about the businesses being paid off, too.
Yeah.
They came in and they're putting in a $25 million park. Our homes have not been tested. $500,000 Norfolk Southern gave for an economic consultant. We haven't had our homes tested. They bought a building to put in this new state-of-the-art firefighting training center, $2 million fire truck, carnivals, Easter egg hunts. But our homes haven't been tested.
And who's paying for that? The businesses?
Norfolk Southern.
Norfolk Southern is paying for that. But then they must know that these settlements are going to be huge. What is going on with the people who have hired attorneys? What is going on with that? Are they? That's in the courts. Are they offering money?
I guess they made it a class action lawsuit, so they combined all the cases together. But that's another thing Unity Council's been dealing with is a lot of complaints about the attorneys because they're not telling people what's going on, and they're not communicating with the people. They came in and signed people up and then took off, and we really haven't heard from any of the attorneys.
Do you know if attorneys can still sign up the stragglers? Because those class action suits, the class action plaintiffs get nothing, man. They get peanuts. And like 50-60% goes to the law firm.
Right. And that's what a lot of those attorneys did.
Yeah.
Was they went to these hotels where these people couldn't afford hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And they fucked them up for like 40%.
Yeah.
And then they told them they'd pay for their hotel rooms. So, the stuff that they did was just really shady. And, the fact that, you have a couple thousand people, because a lot of the attorneys are doing lawsuits 30 miles out. So this is not just East Palestine. These chemicals, the fallout from that toxic plume look like a big mushroom cloud, like they dropped a nuclear bomb. You could see it clear up into outer space.
Yeah.
That stuff went up and then it spread out all over Pennsylvania, down into West Virginia. It went right over Pittsburgh. And you can literally see the pictures of the cloud, and you can see the particles falling out. We just had a Unity Council member that lives 5 miles out in Pennsylvania, and she was lucky enough to get testing from Wright State University, and they found chemicals in her indoor air purifier. She fought and fought to get her reimbursement for her hotel. She just got it. They found these contaminants 5 miles out, in indoor air, but yet they won't test our indoor air.
What about the national media? Have they forgotten all about this?
Most of them, yeah, definitely. They come in for the big boom, and then they were out of here. News Nation is still doing a good job covering us. Chris Cuomo just did an hour special in East Palestine, but, you know, the rest of the media, that's what we feel abandoned by our government. We feel abandoned by the media. Like, no one even knows what's going on here.
Yeah.
And if I do get to talk to one of those people from the media, they're flabbergasted that we're still dealing with this. You know, they didn't realize that stuff is the way it is because nobody's cared to check on us.
Yeah, I had forgotten all about it. I had Joel Atkinson on the show, who was a local volunteer guy just guy on a shoestring, you know, just running down there trying to get people filters and stuff, you know. Had him on the show a long time ago, way back in March 14th. I had him on way back then, and just out of the blue, he contacted me back, says, "Hey, Ed, we found this woman here, Jamie Wallace, from the Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment on Facebook." And that's what sparked my memory, you know. I didn't remember anything about this.
Well, and, like, we have been, you know, when you ask about the lawyers,
yeah,
we have been on, you know, community science. We have been the ones investigating.
Right.
Most recently, there was a second fish kill, and the EPA came out and said it was not due to chemicals. And what had happened is they are replacing this, like, 10-foot bridge that crosses over the creek into our park.
Right.
And creeks are still highly contaminated. If you hit that sediment, I mean, the videos, you would be shocked. And we knew as soon as they tore down that bridge, again, you know, you talk about, is this a cover-up? The EPA can't possibly be that stupid.
Right.
It's common sense. If you poke the sediment and chemicals come out and you tear down that bridge, what's going to happen when you disturb that sediment? So another, you know, a local chiropractor who's been helping us a lot, he lives in East Palestine. His name's Dr. Chai. We call him the Creek Ranger because he's constantly in the creek. He takes the newspaper down to the creek where the EPA is saying they couldn't find chemicals, and he's holding the newspaper as he's poking a stick in the creek. You know, so the EPA kind of had to backtrack. One of the things that people don't know about East Palestine is a lot of the buildings are actually built on top of the creek. There's a series of tunnels that go through our town under the buildings, like under the municipal building. And when we talk about, you know, this potential pathway to exposure and basement, our storm drain system is so old and dilapidated that before you can sell a house in East Palestine, you have to do a dye test. And you have to make sure that that storm drain water doesn't run into basements or yards.
Right.
So we have this issue with water coming in from these creeks into houses through the storm drain. We also have an issue with, the tunnels. Like I was saying, the tunnels. The sewer systems in East Palestine used to run directly into the creek. So they tapped off these pipes when they put in the sewer system. And a lot of them, we found out, were never capped. Like there was an issue at municipal building where it stunk so bad. The only place that I smelt that was worse than our municipal building was my own home. And they found out that there was not a cap over this pipe that, you know, in the tunnel. So all that chemicals that were off-gassing was going straight up into the building. Now, wouldn't you as a city government tell people to check those now? They never mentioned it. So this is what we're dealing with. Dr. Chai walked through those tunnels yesterday, and you can watch the videos. You're not going to believe it. We finally did get the EPA just issued an order for Norfolk Southern to clean up the creek. 9 months later. The EPA will not test my friend's yard, who lives 900 feet from the derailment. It looked like one of the tankers was sitting on her trampoline in her backyard. They won't test it until the remediation is done.
What is the remediation? What is the remediation? Wait, first of all, real quick, a minute ago, your audio was great, like 2 or 3 minutes ago. Did you do something with the phone or move something around?
No, can you still hear me?
Yeah, it's good. It's good enough. So now,
Okay.
what are you talking about?
Sorry.
Remediation. What is the remediation you're talking about?
So when Norfolk Southern decided to blow up these tankers, what they did is they dug these great big burn pits, and they tapped into the side of the tankers, and they put all these chemicals into this pit and then caught the pit on fire. The fear was if they would have exploded, the shrapnel would have went for a mile around. So what Norfolk Southern did was after they burnt those chemicals, there were still, people assumed all those chemicals burnt off, but they weren't. There were still chemicals in those burn pits. Norfolk Southern covered those up with gravel, put their railroad tracks back up, and started running their trains. And again, everything that's been done so far has been community-led because we very much look out our windows every time we hear something. People notice all these truckloads of gravel going in, but no soil coming out.
Right.
So after the trains are back up and running, the EPA says, oh, you know what? They did do that. So now we're going to dig those tracks up and make them remove that contamination. And they did it one track at a time so that the other track could remain open. Now, if the EPA was on site within a couple hours, how the heck did they do that? Cover all that up without the EPA seeing it. It's not like me snatching $5 off your table.
Yeah.
You know, and when I asked, why are you doing one side of the track at a time, I asked EPA that. Well, keep the railroad running, and because you wouldn't want to be exposed to that much contaminated soil at once. In fact, when we do the other side, we're going to ask them to dig it up in smaller increments and then backfill it. Because what they did is they're re-exposing everyone. They had to dig up that contaminated dirt and those chemicals that were still in there. This was supposed to be done by June. Well, the tracks are now allegedly remediated, but there was other contamination. They just found contamination under the railroad, under the road at the railroad crossing. So really, Norfolk Southern didn't clean any of it up. They covered up the burn pit, and they were out of town.
Yeah, if they if they have the EPA covering up for them, there's no reason for them to do this. If they could just say, okay, it's scheduled for this day and for this week, we're going to be doing it, the trucks go back and forth, why would they have to do it if it's being covered up? You know?
Well, I think here's my theory. This is just my theory.
Yeah, now you sound great.
So East Palestine has a north track and a south track. And what people don't realize is we are like the main thoroughway from the east to the west. So if they had to close those tracks down till all this remediation was done, those railroad tracks would still be closed today.
No, I 100% agree with you. And someone made a calculated decision based on money,
right,
that your life is not worth as much as getting Tonka trucks and what are toys and tables over to the other side of the country, you know, or chemicals, whatever they want to move, you know. There's more money in that than taking care of you.
And now all this stuff's into our waterways.
Yeah.
It's leached into our soil. It may even be in our aquifers. You know, this is what they've done, and exactly what you said. It's profit over people.
Yeah, and also, too, the value of the
business?
land and the businesses and the property there, no one's going to want to move and put a new factory or a new business in East Palestine because of the name alone at this point. James,
really, let me tell you about real estate in our town.
You can't because we've only got 4 minutes left. So I want the most important thing to come out of your mouth. What's the most important thing you want people to know?
Market value, but go ahead.
What's the most important thing you want people to know in the next 4 minutes?
I mean, the most important thing that I got out of this is open your eyes to your environment. You know, I didn't pay enough attention to what was even in these tankers traveling through my backyard, and I didn't pay attention to railroad safety, to precision scheduling, to anything to do with these railroads. And if we don't pay attention, it's not a matter of if this will happen again, it's when. And this could be in your backyard. If you live within 30 miles of a railroad, these could be your kids that have blood coming out of their ears and their noses. Mm-hmm. This could be your community that's told we don't know what to do about the chemicals in your body, but we can treat the cancer. We have got to stop this corporate greed. We've got to stop putting profit over people. And we, the people who built this country with our blood, sweat, and tears, need to quit letting these corporations control our own country and act like we're just a disposable cost of doing business.
We need to email this guy at the McPherson at the FEMA DHS Gov, James McPherson, McPherson at .2 at again FEMA.dhs.gov.
No, it's James.McPherson.2, the number 2, at FEMA. Was it DHS?
DHS.gov. And I'll have it in the description of this. And if you need it, if you're listening to the show and you need it, just get a hold of me, OppermanReport.com, and I'll get you all this information. Jamie, we're going to have you come back, okay? We're going to have you come back and check in with us. And whatever we can do to help you out. If some emergency comes up, you need to get on air, just give me a call right away, okay?
Okay.
This is outrageous.
We need prayers and awareness right now. It's the only two things that are going to save us.
Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment. That's on Facebook. Unity Council for the Palestine train derailment. And then the hashtag to check out all the stuff on TikTok and Reels and YouTube. Hashtag EP Unity Council. And there's a YouTube channel too as well, EP Unity Council. And get on the horn to this James McPherson character over here and call the White House, man. Call up Joe Biden and tell him he's got 60 days to declare an emergency here and get something done here for the people of the United States of America. Your neighbors and my neighbors. And we all live 30 miles from train tracks, okay? They may be in the industrial part of town where they fix the cars and they do all this stuff, but everyone has a train track in their town, man. That's how this country was built. So we all need to be concerned about this stuff, not just the Appalachians in West Virginia and these poor people that are just being eaten alive out there. Jamie Wallace, thank you so much. Unity Council for the East Palestine train derailment on Facebook. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.